Have you heard about how I started using the words anti-white and Antiwhitism, two of the many powerful concepts that we use in Going Free? Back in the early 90s, I was getting fed up with the verbiage and the methods of advocacy that our elders and my peers used in the white positive sphere. On one end of the spectrum, there were the academic peacocks that demanded that I carefully and precisely differentiate between every hue of anti-white and anti-white ideology. They demanded that I give the anti-whites the names of their taking. If we weren't using the language and concepts that were approved by the anti-whites, well, then we weren't legitimate. And we weren't legitimate because anti-white professors at prestigious universities would conclude that we were illegitimate. It didn't make any sense to me whatsoever. And the fact that there are still academic peacocks that demand this behavior boggles the mind. On the other end of the spectrum, the lowbrow elders demanded that we give the anti-whites the names of their taking, but we should give the lowbrow versions, such as commie. I found the lowbrow approach to be distasteful, and so I autodidactically read myself and twisted my verbiage into pretzels to be able to speak to every relevant piece of history and historical event and philosophical claim and origin and evolution of the various anti-white ideologies, and I did it all making sure that I spoke precisely with the verbiage that the anti-whites approved of. And just as I saw with others, it was a fabulous failure. Of course, I thought it was a failure because my objective was to free my brothers and sisters of Antiwhitism, and neither method worked to any significant degree in the service of that objective. That was when I began experimenting with the methods by which I could bring people to an understanding of everything they needed to know so that we together as a people could recapture our destiny. Fortunately for me, both of my parents had long-standing reputations for being problem solvers. So whether or not you believe that such things are genetic or environmental in origin, I put that same engine to use in tackling this and the other challenges that stand in our way of recapturing our destiny. I had realized that one of the biggest obstacles to our well-being was the anti-white concept, racism. I saw how a great many other people tried to tackle this concept, and I examined how they failed. After pondering the issue, I realized that the only thing that could defeat a concept would be another concept. I then realized that such a concept would have to be countervailing. I further realized that it would have to be easy to teach. I then concluded that it would have to be easy for those who are taught to share with others. In other words, no innate salesmanship could be required. And this so as to create what we now call a curative contagion, a concept along with other ideas and verbiage that could be easily spread from one person to another. Such a tool wouldn't rely, then, on me delivering a leaflet every day to your house, which still doesn't come close to comparing to a person's consumption of Antiwhitism in the news and entertainment media, in education, in churches, etc. Such a concept had to undermine all of these things. Not like judo, which many people misunderstand. They think that with such a concept, you want to take the weight and strength of your opponent and deflect it away from yourself. But in truth, what was needed was a tactic that could turn the strength of our victimizers into our strength, that could turn their billions and their control of news and entertainment and universities into our control, our strength. That is what was needed for victory. And most importantly, yet again, something that was given no attention whatsoever was the need to create a people out of our deracinated race. A people out of a group of individuals, many of whom not only saw themselves as individuals, but as hyper-individuals. And they thought, on top of that, that it was moral to be such a thing. You see, because I realized that if we did not discover that we as individuals were attacked because our people were attacked, we would never be able to run a countervailing course to our well-being. We would never understand that our individual well-being is only attainable by way of our group's well-being. At the same time, at my blue and white-collar jobs, I was struggling when conveying the information to our brothers and sisters that they needed to have and to understand in order to find their place in the world and do the right thing for their own and therefore all of our well-being. There was also the problem of multiplying the number of victimizers, I should add. When I would rattle off a dozen or more names of different groups, two things would always happen. My audience would doubt whether or not we were right in our positions. How could we be right, they would wonder, if there are so many different groups that think we're wrong? And the second thing that inevitably happened was that it would engender fear. If there are so many groups against us, they would surmise there's nothing that we can do but capitulate. So the concept had to simplify. It had to break things down in a way that people could understand and also not be afraid about. It had to do all of this and more, such as a variability in application of intensity. But if I make the video any longer, no one will watch it. So at the same time, I was using the methods that I had previously stated and having very little success in bringing our brothers and sisters over to what I would later call white well-being. There was this frustration, this quotidian need that I had to resolve. I briefly considered neoterizing a word. I looked into using existing English and foreign words that I could recombine to serve this purpose. But even though I coined several brand new words that I thought could serve the purpose for various reasons, I realized that I simply did not have the ability or the power to propagate the new word to the entirety of the white positive sphere, much less to all of our brothers and sisters. So I was stuck with having to use a word that already existed or a concept that already existed. But there simply wasn't one. I looked in my dictionaries and in the dictionaries at the city library. I asked people throughout the white positive sphere and the dozens of groups from various spheres within the white positive sphere that I participated in or assisted and helped out with different things. At places I was invited to be a speaker, I asked all of them, and there simply was nothing that could serve this purpose. And of course, all of this was in addition to all of the reading and studying I was already doing. So I thought about taking a concept that was close to what I wanted to do and then giving it a little bit of a different meaning so that it could serve our well-being. But I came to the same conclusion, and that was that I faced the problem of redefining something that was already in existence, which I simply did not have the power to do. I concluded that the word would have to be something that, even though it was not in the dictionary, that our brothers and sisters would be able to instantly understand it as though it were in the dictionary, and more importantly, instantly understand its meaning. And at the same time, the word, the concept, would serve all of the other requirements that I spoke about before. And then it hit me. I had been speaking about how all of these different groups have one thing in common, and that one thing is that they victimize Western kind and Western civilization. The subtle hue this way or that way was totally irrelevant. We were white, and those who victimized us were anti-white. I immediately ran to my dictionary. I still have that dictionary that I had back then, and I looked for an entry for anti-white because I knew that if the word already existed, that I was golden, that I could rub everybody's face into the pages of the dictionary who challenged me on this concept. but it wasn't in my dictionary. So I went back to the city library, and it wasn't in their dictionaries. I really felt defeated. With the word not already in the dictionary, I wouldn't have the authority of the dictionary to stand behind me. But I had to move forward nevertheless because it was perfect. Antiwhite was perfect. I realized that everyone that I spoke this concept to would understand the word, they would understand the meaning, and that I realized that it satisfied all of the requirements that I had concluded it had to satisfy. The very next opportunity I had to speak with someone about the victimization of our people, I used Antiwhite, and their eyes got as big as dinner plates. There was a name for the people who were victimizing us, all of the people who were victimizing us. There was a name for their ideology, something that people who are living their lives and paying their bills and dealing with angry bosses and angry spouses, whether their work was blue or white collar, they could easily absorb, understand, and pass on to other people. Within a week or two of using Antiwhite, I realized that everyone knew what ism was, so I added ism to the end of Antiwhite and named their doctrine Antiwhitism. That became the superset in which all of the subsets were contained. Subsets with names like feminism and Marxism and communism, etc. For years, I put this concept to use, and everywhere I spoke, I was opposed by those who, though they liked my talent and my vigor and my enthusiasm, they objected to me using verbiage that wasn't in the dictionary, that Antiwhites in universities would not approve of, or that wasn't, for the lowbrow, vulgar enough for the people who were victimizing us. And then there was the crowd that acted as though acknowledging that we were victimized by way of Antiwhites and Antiwhitism was somehow a weakness, something that the Antiwhites do, that it was somehow deep weakness to acknowledge that your people are victimized, when in fact the refusal to acknowledge that your people are victimized is not only the height of inanity, but also a great demonstration of profound insecurity. It wasn't until the late 2000s that I heard about a spunky little group led by a guy whose name I'm sure I can't say with the AI listening. I guess I will say that his last name sounded like Wicker, and his first name was Bob. And he had created a slogan, and his intrepid team of heroes were busily spreading this slogan in an attempt to feed it out into the common parlance and common conversation. I won't be able to repeat that slogan here because, of course, the AI is listening, but it incorporated the word anti-white. Regrettably, though, that man and his team seemed like a million miles away to me. It didn't feel like Vindication at all. It just felt like somebody else who was smart enough to do the right thing, but there were still too many people standing in opposition. And so now, I cannot tell you how good 2 decades of Vindication now feels. Just days ago, 2 participants in the Going Free community, Final Blossom was one of them, and I can't remember the name of the other gentleman, found the word anti-white and even the word Antiwhitism in older dictionaries. About a year ago or so, I was having a conversation with Tim Murdoch, the protege to Bob, and he had said that Bob had a dictionary, or had seen a dictionary from the early 1900s that contained the word anti-white, and that it was defined in exactly the same way as we use it today. And that was a very exciting thing to learn, even though I hadn't seen the dictionary myself. But now we have this. Not only did anti-white and anti-whitism exist in the past and have entries in dictionaries from the past, but these words have been excised from many current dictionaries by anti-whites, clearly endeavoring to deprive us of the words that we need to defend ourselves. And my friends, we only think in words. If you don't have the words that you need to defend yourselves, you can't even think in defense of yourself. This is the smoking gun. Proof positive that the anti-whites are endeavoring not only by way of language creation to victimize us, but also by way of language deletion. Discovering these entries also now makes it far harder for the anti-whites to redefine what anti-white and anti-whiteism mean, because not only would they have to go against the current common usage of these words, but they would also have to go against precedent, long-standing records of both of these words defined as we are using them today, even if excised by anti-whites in the last few decades. I simply cannot tell you how much this excites me. And you should be feeling that same enthusiasm. This is a massive victory for white well-being. It is colossal. They cannot claim that we have coined some nonce word, some jabberwocky, and that these people, they're just so dumb, they're just so uneducated. No, these concepts have historic credibility. And in fact, we have their bloody fingerprints all over the pages of so many dictionaries now where these words were removed. I'm going to end the video here because it's already long enough, and I know if it gets any longer, no one's going to listen to it, and I've got to get back to my work for white well-being. Got a lot of work and a lot of things going on. But I wonder, I have to say this, I wonder how many of those people who opposed me over all of those years for using anti-white and anti-whiteism and telling me that they were not legitimate, that the words were not legitimate because they weren't in the dictionary and anti-white professors hadn't approved them. How many of these pretentious little pricks are going to pick up their phones and give me a call to apologize? I'm not going to hold my breath. The lowbrows don't have the class, and the academic peacocks don't have any character.